So hi Gary, how you doing today? All right?
Hi there. Can I just
Times.
create it's leanmansystem.com, Josh?
Good times. So can you give me a little bit of background about what Lean Man is and kind of what it does for people?
Sure. It really came out of my work training personal trainers. I've trained personal trainers for the past 15 years, something like that, and kept in touch with all the trainers that I've trained. And I was getting feedback from them that this kind of method was really working. There's nothing fancy about it. It's just sound nutrition education, getting clients active all the time. So I said to Future Fit, who I was working for at the time, that it would be really useful if we had data on this. And so they sponsored me to do my PhD. So the whole
Wow.
of the Lean Man system is based on PTs going out into the real world and getting results.
Awesome.
So it's nothing clever. It's just about sound nutrition education. I can train any PT to do it because we had 26 odd PTs that all managed to get really good results with their clients.
Awesome. Sounds good. Love it. So the first question I want to ask you really is what common nutrition mistakes do you see most PTs making as like a general kind of guideline? Because obviously there's a lot of conflicting information when it comes to nutrition, especially on different courses, and if people are looking into more like bro science rather than research
Yeah.
topics. So
Right.
what do you see being like a common mistake or some common mistakes?
I think the biggest mistake that a lot of PTs make is forgetting that their clients don't like the gym, most probably don't like exercise, and are very unlikely to follow some strict dietary plan long term. They'll follow it for 5 or 6 weeks, while it's kind of new and motivational and what have you.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be any good as a PT, you want your client to have long-term results. And I've always thought that every PT's aim in life should be to get rid of their clients. And people go, what do you mean? I said, well, if you can educate your client well enough about exercise, nutrition, and so on, there must come a natural point where they don't really need you. They know what they're doing.
True.
And so rather than concentrating on fad diets and protein shakes and what have you, they need to find things that are going to work for that client's lifestyle. Because my kind of mantra with the lean system is, it's your lifestyle that got you fat, and it's only your lifestyle that's going to get you thin again. So that's what we should be addressing. And I think to kind of just write down a whole bunch of foods on a sheet of paper, or to write out recipe plans, which quite frankly, most PTs, I don't think they realize they're not qualified to do that. And at some point, someone is going to get sued for doing this, because it's happened in the States already where a PT's been sued for injuring his client with nutrition. So it's only a matter of time before it happens here. So I'm a big advocate of find out what your client currently does and then start to adjust that slowly over a period of time. But certainly don't jump in with both feet and start, right, you've got to do this. You must eat breakfast. You must have that meal. You must have a protein shake after training. It's like all these things, yeah, they'll do it for a few weeks, but the novelty is going to wear off. And then one of two things will happen. They will either not get results, in which case they'll ditch the PT anyway, or the results won't be what or they won't stick to the plan. And then they'll be starting to make excuses to their trainers. Oh, I couldn't quite do that today because I was a bit busy or I didn't have time. And so you kind of slowly, the whole motivation just wears off. And then eventually the PT loses that client. So from a PT's point of view, they're going to improve their retention if what they're doing is looking at that client's lifestyle, as opposed to, oh, but I know this works and this is the plan I always use. Because quite frankly, there is no one plan that always works.
Too true. So with with nutrition, do you see what kind of things do you see as common myths that still hang around the industry? So for example, one of the ones that I've been kind of looking into myself is metabolism and how often you eat. So for example, some people say, oh, it isn't affected unless you've been fasting for 36 hours, then it starts to slow down. Some people say you need to eat every 1.654 hours. There's all sorts of information about it. So what sort of common myths do you see?
Well, if somebody's trying to tell their client to eat every 1.654 hours, I give them about 6 weeks with that client and they won't see him again.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's interesting because I always used to teach, I have to say, up until about 6 months ago, that eating little and often was the way to go, because based on what evidence we had at the time, it would appear that 5 to 6 meals was the optimal in terms of metabolic effect, because of the thermogenic effect of the food. And what I mean by that is the thermogenic effect of the food is how many calories it actually burns in the very act of being digested and absorbed and so on. And so, as I say, I always used to teach 5 to 6 meals a day was optimal. However, new research has shown that actually, if you compare 5 or 6 meals a day to 3 meals a day, in terms of the effect on metabolism, it doesn't have a huge amount of difference. That's not to say that eating 5 or 6 meals a day is a bad thing, because I just think it, from a weight management perspective, if you are able to eat 5 or 6 meals a day, you're most probably not going to get too hungry, and you are starting to eat to your hunger. But in terms of, is it really necessary that your client eats 5 or 6 meals a day because that will boost their metabolism? This new research shows that that's not really the case. And the other thing that you want to look at within this kind of, however many meals you're going to go with, is ensuring there's always protein sources in there. Because kind of coming back to that thermogenic effect again, protein's got a thermogenic effect of about 25%. So you eat 100 calories of protein, 25 of those calories are burnt off before you even kick off.
Nice.
So protein's efficient from a weight management kind of energy balance point of view. And the other big plus with protein, and this is something always to bear in mind, is it's really satiating. So your client doesn't feel hungry. And I think that's quite important, because the minute they kind of get that hunger drive, they're going to look around for whatever's convenient. And 9 times out of 10, whatever's convenient ain't that great.
Yeah. Bad times. So are there any other kind of, any other myths you see maybe? Because one of the things that I've actually recently seen is that CLA has been kind of pushed as a fat burner for ages and ages. But then I actually looked at what studies were done on humans, and saw there was pretty much no effect. However, they were turning rats into, like super rats, but then for humans there was kind of no effect. So
I recently posted about this on my Facebook page, because it does my nut when I see personal trainers pushing CLA and saying they're nutrition consultants. It's like, well, if you're going to call yourself a nutrition consultant, then at least understand nutrition and have a reasonable idea of what the latest research is.
Yeah.
There are a couple of studies that have been done in humans where they have found mild fat loss, but not statistically significant. And they were small study groups. And most importantly, there was at least 7 to 8 other confounding variables. In other words, that fat loss could have been down to 7 or 8 other factors. And this is why I think it's so important that trainers, even if you don't come from an academic background, and yes, I'm an academic, but I come from a personal training background. I mean, I've been a personal trainer for 22 years, so nobody can throw in my face, you don't understand the real world, because unfortunately for you, I've been in the real world most than a lot of these trainers that are out there. So understanding research is really important, because otherwise what you get is these companies that market these things, they'll cherry pick bits of research, and it'll kind of, one sentence, we managed to get these results. But actually, when you look at the overall picture, it's like, those results are meaningless. So as I say, there's about 1 or 2 studies that have found something, but not statistically significant.
Yeah.
The majority of the studies have found either no result or actually a negative result. And the first research that started on CLA, where it was suddenly everybody's going, oh yeah, it's going to be a fat burner, was done in rats. So most of the kind of studies we have, the initial studies, were all done on rat models. Well, humans are nothing like rats, unfortunately.
Some of them are.
The other, the other thing about CLA is, which is quite interesting, and maybe the main reason why people should just not bother with it, a lot of academics have kind of stopped researching CLA simply because nobody has yet to come up with either a biochemical, a physiological, or a metabolic pathway where you could say, well, that's where CLA works, so that is why it would enhance fat burning. So we can't even think of a mechanism as to why it should work. So it's hardly surprising that it doesn't work, because we don't know that there's any mechanism where it would. So CLA, definitely not. And the other one is carnitine. I mean, that's been around, go into any gym that's got fat burning products on the shelf and that will contain L-carnitine. Now, this is another good example of the supplement industry. They find, and there is a metabolic pathway for L-carnitine. It helps fatty acids move across the cellular boundary. It's part of how fats are oxidized. But just because you recognize that pathway, taking something as a supplement is no guarantee that you'll enhance that pathway. I mean, the body's really good at kind of maintaining what we call homeostasis, so everything stays where it should be, and it's quite difficult to get the body to shift one way or the other. And what we know with L-carnitine is people can take it, it can increase the concentrations in the plasma, but there is no evidence that an increased concentration of carnitine in your blood plasma will then go on to enhance fat burning. So another urban myth. I mean, my most common answer, because when I'm training PTs in nutrition, it's a question I get asked all the time. But what about fat burners? My answer is always the same. If one of them worked, every GP would be prescribing it and we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic. And it's like, look around you. So, a bit of common sense would help with some of these things, I think.
So true. So another kind of thing I was going to ask you about, I've got 4 diets listed here, and I just wanted to know what you think of each one in general terms, how well clients will take to it in general, the kind of principles behind it, if they're scientifically sound, that sort of thing. So just your general opinion. So the first one is the paleo diet. What do you think of that?
Well, if we knew what Paleolithic man really looked like, then I'd kind of have a bit more time for it. It's a higher protein diet, so I haven't got issues with that. I know a lot of dietitians will go, ooh, high protein, but I don't really have too much of an issue with that because we've got little evidence that higher protein diets actually cause you any problem, providing you haven't got kidney issues. But my kind of thinking on the paleo diet is, okay, if we could really replicate what Paleolithic man did, then everybody's going to have to get a damn sight more active. We're going to have to go through fasting and feasting, which we don't do now. You can always go down to the 24-hour supermarket down the road and get food, so you're not waiting for the next dinosaur to come along. The type of meat that Paleolithic man would have eaten would have been very lean, because they would have been animals in the wild that are doing everything they can to survive, and running and keeping out the way of predators would have been top of that kind of priority list. So they wouldn't have been the corn-fed, steroid-fed, whatever type of kind of system you want to look at in terms of the way we now produce our meat. So the meat would have been very different. And then the vegetable kind of fruit side of it also would have been very different. You wouldn't have had all the pesticides, the residues and everything else. And also it would have been very seasonal. So to say, I'm trying to replicate the Paleolithic diet, I think there's kind of flaws in that argument. In terms of, would it help for weight management? I think it'll help for most people, because quite frankly, the people that are putting on weight are most probably eating a load of rubbish and not very active. So if you change them to a diet that is predominantly natural-based foods and you get them more active, 9 times out of 10, I reckon you're going to see some type of fat loss. And I don't like talking about weight loss, because weight loss, I do think, is a bit misleading. I think I really do wish we could change the language and talk fat loss, because weight loss is just, it's the scales and they'll say anything. So, so paleo, it's okay. I've got an issue with all diets, to be quite frank. And there's a study a big study been done in the Journal of the American Medical Association that has pretty much turned around and said we should stop researching diet. And that's simply because every derivation of a diet has now been studied, whether it be high protein, low protein, high carbs, white carbs, simple, complex. You think of a combination, there's research on it. But when you look at the success rate of that research at 5-year follow-up for the people that bother to stay on it, so already that's a small proportion, the average weight loss is about 1 to 2 kilograms. And so it's like, well, if we're going to spend all that money and that's the best we could do, maybe we better start researching elsewhere. And basically what this study has said is we need to start looking at why people or how people make lifestyle change, because that is actually the key to this. Because I think with diets, one of the reasons they tend not to work across the board is what will work for you won't work for you, for the person that's standing next to you, because as humans, we're all so different. We seem to respond to things in different ways. When I work with athletes, I can have two athletes that train in the same way. They're training for the same event. They're about the same body composition. And yet what works for one patently doesn't work for the other. And you would think, well, why should that be? And it is this genetic kind of difference. So that's where I'm at with paleo anyway.
Good times. Okay, so the next one, I do this myself occasionally, is intermittent fasting. So,
Right.
Again, this has been thrown around. People say obviously there's metabolic disadvantages, and then some people say the opposite. You know, that it teaches you to kind of control hunger cravings, that sort of thing. So, what do you think about kind of intermittent fasting?
Well, intermittent fasting works if you do it the way that the academics that set that up in the first place do it. And I've actually spoken to the doctor at Leeds Carnegie who actually first started using intermittent fasting. And interestingly, it was used for cancer patients of all things, not weight loss. But she said that it's been hijacked by the media. No surprise there then. And she says now people think intermittent fasting is you can eat any food you like on your 5 days and you're not allowed anything on your 2 days off kind of thing. And she says that was never what was designed, and that's not what's been researched. She said, for starters, on the kind of no food days, if you want to call them that, it's a minimum of 600 calories, and that should be healthy eating. There's none of this, oh, it's 600 calories, eat what you want. It's still the same parameters in terms of your fruit and veg and so on. On the other days, she said, you can eat more, but I think they allow certainly within the protocol they had, it was up to about 3,000 calories. But again, it wasn't, anything, as long as you're getting your 3,000 calories, it doesn't matter how you get them. It was still fruit, veg, meat, dairy and so on. So still a balanced and quite healthy, natural diet, no processed foods in there.
Okay, awesome.
So I think if we kind of follow those rules, we're kind of healthy eating, and I do think the odd day where you don't eat very much most probably won't do you any harm. And in fact, I've found this with my clients. You can get them to eat quite healthy, and I always kind of work on creating an energy deficit, and that's really successful. But it certainly doesn't seem to do them any harm. And in fact, in some cases, it actually helps, where on some days they just kind of have a complete blowout and it just goes totally pear-shaped. And that seems to work for them. So it's like your body, no matter what you do, no matter what regime, your body does seem to adjust to it. And I think changing things up seems to be successful. And I think it's a similar thing that you see with training. If you do the same training regime for too long, the kind of results don't kind of follow track. They kind of slowly pair off. So you need to change it up. And I think your diet might well be a bit like that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, the next one could be a bit controversial. I'm ready for
Aren't they all?
Yeah, true. What do you think about, and I won't name any names, what do you think about meal replacement kind of plans or...
I'll name names. I'm quite happy to.
Yeah, okay. Let's throw them out there.
Research.
So, Herbalife, Body by Vi.
Body by Vi.
Juice Plus. Who else is there? Arbonne. I've heard of that one.
There's a new one now, TR90. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one.
This is a new one that claims to be a genetic diet or whatever. Still kind of shakes and pills and God knows what, but
crazy. So, what are your kind of thoughts? I think I already can predict what you're going to say, but what are your kind of thoughts on meal replacements?
I think they've got their place with athletes sometimes.
Yeah.
When you just cannot get the calories in, when it's not practical to use everyday foods. So I'm talking someone that maybe needs 6,000-7,000 calories a day. You're trying to get that from food, you are going to struggle. There's no two ways about it. But in terms of, would I then go out and use something like Herbalife or Body by Vi? No, I wouldn't. I'd kind of make up my own meal replacement, because I've always thought that with our diets, the thing that is causing us the problem is all the things we add to it. So whether that be fructose, corn sugar, table sugar, colorings, whatever, stabilizers. The reason we have so many issues in terms of health, obesity, or whatever, it's all these things. It's the way we mess about with food. And when you look at the ingredients in things like Visalis, Herbalife, whatever, the ingredient list reads like some blooming mad chemist has had a field day. It's like there is no way that can be healthy for you. And it annoys me when I see PTs, and basically what they're doing is they're reiterating the marketing blurb that they've been kind of indoctrinated with. All this, well, I start my client off on their meal replacement, and that is moving them towards a healthy lifestyle while they eat properly. And it's just like, that is so rubbish. Where is your evidence for that? And it's like, yeah, but all my clients lose weight on it. Well, all my clients would lose weight if I put them on a shake that kind of reduced their calorie intake by 500-600 calories every day. Pretty much guarantee they'd lose weight. So it's not exactly a very good argument. It's neither argument holds up in terms of show me the research evidence for that. This other diet I was saying about, the TR90, the guy who's pushing it, he asked me, he said, oh, what's your opinion on this? And I said, well, if you can send me peer-reviewed research, then I'll have a read of that and I'll form an opinion based on that. I'm definitely not one of these people that goes, no, that's the way it is, tough. I'm very much, if you show me research that's moved things on, I will change what I'm teaching, bottom line, because I want to be evidence-based all the time. And he sent me this YouTube video that was just pure marketing and no peer-reviewed evidence anywhere. So I kind of back to him on message and said, well, where's the evidence then? And it alluded to it all the way through, you know, our science has shown, we've done this research, but at no point was any shown. And funnily enough, he hasn't replied to me since. So.
At times. Okay, so the last one I wanted to kind of cover was elimination diets, where people eliminate certain foods from their diet to then alleviate certain symptoms, be it, you know, poor digestion or eczema, whatever. Is there really like a scientific basis as such for that kind of protocol? And what do you think of it as well?
There's a scientific basis for the protocol, because that's what we kind of do in the NHS. I mean, I don't, so I'm not a dietitian. So, I mean, this will put it into perspective. I've got a PhD and a first class honours in nutrition. I won't deal with anyone that's got celiacs or whatever. I refer them straight to a dietitian, because that is a clinical nutritional problem. And PTs should not be trying to kind of solve that type of problem. A, they're not qualified, and B, they could do more harm than good. But an elimination diet is the way you go. They use real bland foods, but they do it very differently to what some PTs think an elimination diet is. They'll do it for about 4 days, the client's on it, 4 to 6 days. They then add back the particular food that they think may be an allergen of some description, and they do blood tests, and they look for an increase in white blood cell count. So they're looking for a pure immune response. So I've had people say to me, oh yeah, I've done this elimination diet, and when I put the food back into my diet, I suddenly felt bloated again and all that. And it's like, well, you will do, because your digestive system will now adjust to whatever you're eating. It will down-regulate whatever enzymes and bacteria is in the colon, because that will change because you've changed your diet. You now add back a food that the body kind of hasn't seen for a while, and it's like, whoa, what's this? Don't quite know how to deal with it. And so you might get a bit of excess gas or a bit more inflammation, but give it time, that would settle down. But unfortunately, people add back, I mean, the classic one is gluten. You know, so they eliminate all gluten for 2 weeks. They go, oh yeah, I feel really good. But what they fail to kind of recognize is whilst they've been eliminating gluten, they've improved their diet massively in terms of they've most probably not got so many processed foods in there. They've most probably cut out caffeine and God knows what. So although they're feeling better, a lot of that's down to, we've just improved your diet, actually. You now add back the gluten. Yeah, you feel a bit bloated, a bit sluggish. And now you psychologically go, oh, do you know, it was the gluten that was doing that all along. Once you set up that type of psychology in your head, you are not getting rid of it. You know, and so now whenever you have something that's contains gluten, you instantly start to reproduce the symptoms, because psychologically, you're like, right, well, if I eat that type of food, this is what happens to me. So much of it will be almost kind of like a placebo effect in reverse, if you like. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a classic example of that. I always say to my students, I hate butter. Butter makes me throw up. So I could technically say, oh, I'm allergic to butter. But actually I'm not, because I can eat things that have got butter mixed in it. And I can eat cheese, which is very near to butter. And what it is when I was a baby in Singapore, my dad was in the forces, butter over there was made slightly different. And it did make me throw up. Now, obviously, somewhere in my head, I remember that. So now I can eat something and somebody will go, there was butter on that. And it's like I can taste it instantly and I have to throw up. Now, if that was a physiological reaction, I'd have thrown up straight away. But the very fact that I have to be told, and then it's like, whoa. And that shows you how powerful your brain is in terms of how it will make your body respond to certain things.
Okay, so my final question, and you can put some shameless plugs in here if you want. What would be your top kind of resources for personal trainers? If we had to choose 3 resources for kind of ongoing nutrition education, what would you choose?
For nutrition education, I would certainly go on to the Harvard Public Health, because they publish up the latest research. You can subscribe to a newsletter on there for free, and they just send it out, and they do some really good webinars and stuff that you can watch, and they'll have some of the leading researchers kind of discuss. They did one recently where they were discussing the obesity epidemic and how to cure it, and that, and what their best kind of way forward was on that. Totally free for an hour, and you get 3 of the leading researchers in the world discussing it. So that's a very good free resource. In terms of your clients, personally, I use MyFitnessPal, because one of the things that came out of my PhD research was one of the successful elements of a weight management course or any type of weight management program is self-monitoring. And so if you use something like MyFitnessPal, where your clients are recording their dietary intake and their activity, you as the trainer can access it, so get them to give you their password.
Okay.
You can kind of go in there and check what they're doing and see where they're going. That the dietary analysis in MyFitnessPal underestimates slightly, but nonetheless, it's still getting the client to self-monitor. And so from your perspective as a trainer, it's kind of giving you some type of control as to what's going on. In terms of places to go to look for information, I think the key thing really is, as I said to you earlier on, learn to understand how to read research. You don't necessarily have to read thousands of papers, but at least understand what is good research and what is bad research. You know, learn how to become critical about it. And then whenever you see a study, so like the questions you just asked me, whether it be paleo, fasting, whatever, go on somewhere like PubMed, in search on it, and just see what's come up in the last couple of years and have a quick scan through and make a decision for yourself. But make that decision based on what the research is saying, not on what's being put out there either by the media or what I would call kind of celebrity trainers who most probably their nutritional background is, to say the least, a bit flaky. And just as a marketing plug, I run a nutritional academy. It costs £3 a month. I mean, it's the price of a cup of coffee. And I publish research up in there. There are forums in there for trainers to talk to each other. And most importantly, you can ask me questions. So if you have got a question either about your client or about a new piece of research, you can just go into there and go, just read about this. What do you think? I'll give you a reply. So you've always got someone you can refer back to who is qualified to go, yeah, do that. No, don't bother with that. That's liable to be kind of a bit flaky.
Awesome. Good times. Well, thank you for your time today, Gary.
No problem.
What I'll do is this will go up on YouTube.
Okay.
And then I'll spread the link. And then if you want a copy of this video as well, then to use for your stuff, then I can send it over. I'll edit it and then kind of send you a copy once it's all cut down and do it that way. And then maybe see if we can organise some more. Good time.
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Cheers, Josh. Speak to you soon.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
And you. Bye.